The dust on the Nevada road had turned pink with her blood, and Marilee Finch knew she could not take another step without collapsing forever. She had been walking for 3 days since the wagon train abandoned her, accused of theft by a spiteful woman who wanted Marilee's intended for herself. The accusation was false, but mob mentality had taken hold, and they had left her on the side of the trail with nothing but the clothes on her back and a single canteen of water that had run dry yesterday morning. Her shoes, cheap things purchased in St. Louis before the journey west, had fallen apart on the second day, the soles separating from the uppers until she had finally kicked them off entirely. Now her feet were raw meat, leaving crimson prints on the hard-packed earth with every agonizing step. The sun beat down mercilessly on her bonnet, and she could feel her lips cracking, taste copper in her mouth. She had been aiming for Virginia City, which the wagon master had said was only 2 days ahead when they had cast her out. But on foot, alone, without water or food, 2 days might as well have been 200 miles. Marilee stumbled, caught herself, stumbled again. This time her knees hit the ground hard enough to make her cry out. She stayed there, swaying, watching her blood drip onto the pale dirt. She was 20 years old, and she was going to die on this God-forsaken road, and no one would ever know what had become of her. Then she heard it. The steady clip-clop of horse hooves, moving at an easy walk. She tried to lift her head, but the sun was directly behind the rider, turning him into nothing more than a dark silhouette. For a moment, she feared it might be someone from the wagon train, come back to finish what they had started. But then the horse stopped, and she heard the creak of leather as the rider dismounted. Boots appeared in her limited field of vision. Good boots, well made and well worn. The man crouched down, and she saw his face properly for the first time. He was young, perhaps 25, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of storm clouds. His face was weathered by sun and wind, his jaw covered with several days' worth of stubble. He wore a dusty black hat, a blue shirt faded nearly white, and a leather vest. A gun sat low on his hip, the holster tied down like he knew how to use it. He looked at her feet, and something flickered across his face, too quick for her to read. Then he looked at her face, and their eyes met. She saw no pity there, which she appreciated. Just a quiet assessment and then a decision being made. Without a word, he stood and walked back to his horse, a big bay gelding with intelligent eyes. He returned with a canteen, unscrewed the cap, and held it to her lips. "Slow," he said. His voice was deep and rough, like he did not use it often. Marilee wanted to gulp, to drain the entire canteen, but she forced herself to take small sips. The water was warm and tasted of metal and leather, and it was the most wonderful thing she had ever experienced. After a few sips, he pulled it away. "More in a minute," he said. "Too much at once will make you sick." She nodded, not trusting her voice. He studied her for another moment, then walked back to his horse again. This time he pulled a cloth from his saddlebag and wet it with water from another canteen. He knelt beside her again and with surprising gentleness began to clean the blood and dirt from her feet. Marilee hissed at the first touch, tears springing to her eyes. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I know I must look a sight." He glanced up at her. "You look like someone who has been walking the desert without shoes," he said. There was no judgment in his tone, just a statement of fact. "Who left you out here?" "The wagon train I was traveling with," she said. "They accused me of stealing, but I did not. I swear I did not." He studied her face for a long moment, then nodded once and went back to cleaning her feet. "I believe you," he said simply, and somehow those 3 words meant more than any lengthy declaration might have. When he had cleaned both feet as well as he could, he tore strips from the cloth and wrapped them carefully, cushioning the worst of the damage. Then he stood and held out his hand to her. Can you stand?" Marilee took his hand and tried to rise, but her legs would not hold her. She started to fall, and he caught her easily, one arm around her waist. For a moment they stood there, her leaning against his chest, and she could feel the steady beat of his heart through his shirt. "I am sorry," she said again. "I am not usually so weak." "You are not weak," he said. "You walked 3 days in the desert without water or shoes. Most men I know would not have lasted one." He swept her up into his arms then, carrying her to his horse as easily as if she weighed nothing at all. The bay stood perfectly still as the man lifted her up onto the saddle, then swung up behind her. His arms came around her to take the reins, and she felt surrounded by his presence, his warmth, his strength. "What is your name?" she asked as he turned the horse toward Virginia City. There was a pause, as if he had to think about it. "Nathan," he said finally. "Nathan Young." "I am Marilee Finch," she said. "Thank you for saving my life, Mr. Young." "Nathan," he said, "and you would have made it. You are tougher than you know." Marilee was not sure that was true, but she was too tired to argue. She let herself lean back against his chest, feeling the gentle sway of the horse beneath them. The last thing she remembered before exhaustion claimed her was the feeling of his arm tightening slightly around her waist, holding her secure. She woke to the sound of voices and the smell of wood smoke and cooking meat. For a disorienting moment, she could not remember where she was or how she had gotten there. Then it all came rushing back. The wagon train, the walk, the blood, and Nathan Young appearing like something out of a fever dream. She opened her eyes and found herself lying on a bedroll in the shade of a canvas lean-to. The sun was lower now, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Nathan was crouched by a small fire, cooking something in a battered pan. He glanced over as she stirred. "How do you feel?" he asked. Marilee took inventory. Her head ached, her lips were still cracked and sore, and her feet throbbed with every heartbeat. But she was alive and she was safe, and that was more than she had hoped for a few hours ago. "Better," she said. "Thank you." He nodded and turned back to the fire. "We will camp here tonight. Virginia City is still a half-day's ride and you need rest." "You do not have to do all this for me," Marilee said, struggling to sit up. "I have already taken so much of your time." Nathan glanced at her again, and there was something in his expression she could not quite read. "I was not doing anything important," he said, "just riding." "Where were you going?" He was quiet for a moment, poking at whatever was in the pan. "Nowhere in particular," he said finally. "Just riding." Marilee wanted to ask more, but something in his tone suggested that line of questioning was closed. Instead, she watched him work, noticing the economical precision of his movements, the way he seemed perfectly comfortable alone in the wilderness. This was a man who was used to his own company, she realized. Used to silence and solitude. When the food was ready, he brought it to her on a tin plate. Bacon, beans, and hardtack softened in the bacon grease. It was simple fare, but Marilee thought she had never tasted anything better. She ate slowly, remembering his warning about making herself sick, and he watched to make sure she did not overdo it. "Tell me what happened," Nathan said when she had finished eating. "With the wagon train." Marilee set the plate aside and wrapped her arms around her knees. "There was a woman traveling with us," she said. "Mrs. Patterson. She had her eye on a man in our party, a merchant from Philadelphia named Mr. Granger. He had been showing interest in me instead, and she did not like that." "So she accused you of theft," Nathan said. "Her cameo brooch went missing," Marilee said. "She claimed she had seen me admiring it, claimed she had caught me trying to take it from her trunk. It was not true. I had never been in her wagon, never touched her belongings. But she was very convincing, and Mr. Granger believed her." "They all did. Did they find the brooch?" Nathan asked. Marilee shook her head. "No, But that did not matter. Mrs. Patterson said I must have hidden it or thrown it away when I realized I had been caught. The wagon master said they could not have a thief traveling with them, said it would cause too much trouble, so they left me. With nothing, Nathan said, and there was an edge to his voice now. Mr. Granger gave me the canteen, Marilee said, and some hardtack. That was something, I suppose. Nathan said nothing, but his jaw was tight. He stood and walked to where his horse was hobbled, checking the animal with the same careful attention he had shown to Marilee's feet. When he came back, he had another blanket. "Temperature will drop once the sun is down," he said, handing it to her. "You should rest. We will leave at first light." "Where will you go?" Marilee asked. "After you take me to Virginia City, I mean." Nathan settled himself on the other side of the fire, tipping his hat down over his eyes. "Nowhere in particular," he said again. "Just riding." Marilee wanted to say more, wanted to thank him properly, wanted to understand this quiet man who had saved her life and asked for nothing in return. But exhaustion was pulling at her again, and her eyes were already closing. The last thing she heard was the crackle of the fire and the distant call of a coyote, and then she was asleep. She dreamed of walking, endless walking, her feet leaving bloody prints that stretched behind her to the horizon. But then strong arms lifted her up, and she was flying, the desert falling away beneath her, and she was not afraid anymore. Morning came cold and clear. Marilee woke to find Nathan already up, the fire reduced to coals, the horse saddled and ready. He had made coffee in a dented pot, and he handed her a cup without comment. The coffee was strong and bitter, but it chased away the last cobwebs of sleep. "How are your feet?" Nathan asked. Marilee unwrapped the makeshift bandages and examined the damage. The bleeding had stopped, and while the cuts and blisters were still painful, they looked clean. "Better," she said. "Much better, thanks to you." Nathan pulled fresh cloth from his saddlebag along with a small tin of salve. "This will help," he said, handing them to her. "My mother's recipe. Comfrey and honey and some other things." It was the first personal detail he had shared, and Marilee seized on it. "Your mother taught you medicine?" she asked, carefully applying the salve to her feet. It was cool and soothing, easing the burn immediately. "She taught me a lot of things," Nathan said. His voice was neutral, but there was something underneath it, some old pain that he kept carefully locked away. "Is she still alive?" Marilee asked gently. "No," Nathan said. "Cholera 5 years back. My father went the same week." "I am so sorry," Marilee said, and meant it. She knew loss. Her own parents had died when she was 16, leaving her to be raised by an aunt who saw her as more of a burden than a blessing. It was that aunt who had arranged for Marilee to go west, to marry a miner in California who needed a wife. Marilee had agreed, wanting adventure and independence more than she wanted love. Now she was not sure she would ever make it to California, or if she even wanted to anymore. Nathan just nodded and began to kick dirt over the coals of the fire. Within minutes, he had broken camp completely, leaving no trace that they had been there. He helped Marilee to her feet, steadied her when she wobbled, then lifted her onto the horse again. This time, as he swung up behind her, Marilee was more aware of his closeness. She could smell leather and wood smoke and something else, something that was just him. His chest was solid against her back, his arms bracketing her as he took the reins. It should have felt uncomfortable, being this close to a strange man. Instead, it felt safe. They rode in silence for a while, the desert landscape rolling past in shades of brown and gold and rust red. The sun climbed higher, but the movement of the horse created enough breeze to keep them relatively cool. Marilee found her eyes growing heavy again, lulled by the rhythm of the ride and the warmth of Nathan's body behind her. "You can sleep if you need to," Nathan said quietly. "I will not let you fall." "I do not want to be a burden," Marilee said. "You are not," Nathan said simply, and something in his tone made her believe him. So she let herself relax, let her head rest against his shoulder, and dozed as they rode. She woke once to find his arm around her waist again, holding her secure, and she felt a strange flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with fear or gratitude. By the time the sun was directly overhead, they could see Virginia City in the distance. It was not much to look at, just a collection of wooden buildings huddled in a valley, but to Marilee it looked like salvation. As they drew closer, she could see the main street, dusty and crowded with wagons and horses and people going about their business. There was a general store, a saloon, a hotel, a bank, a church. All the trappings of civilization, such as it was. Nathan guided the horse down the main street, ignoring the curious stares they attracted. He stopped in front of the hotel, a two-story building with a fresh coat of white paint and curtains in the windows. "Wait here," he said, swinging down from the horse. He disappeared inside, and Marilee sat alone in the saddle, very aware of the look she was getting. She knew what she must look like. Hair tangled and full of dust, dress torn and stained, feet wrapped in bloody rags. She lifted her chin and stared back at the gawkers until they looked away. Nathan emerged a few minutes later with an older woman in a crisp gray dress. She had kind eyes and capable hands, and she took in Marilee's condition with a single sweeping glance. "Lord have mercy," the woman said. "What happened to you, child?" "Long story," Marilee said, suddenly exhausted again. "Well, you can tell it to me while I get you cleaned up," the woman said. She looked at Nathan. "You did right, bringing her here. I am Mrs. Whittaker. I run this establishment." Nathan just nodded. He reached up and lifted Marilee down from the horse, setting her gently on her feet. When she swayed, Mrs. Whittaker steadied her. "Come on, dear," the woman said. "Let us get you inside and taken care of." Marilee looked back at Nathan. He was already gathering the reins, preparing to leave. "Wait," she said. "I have not even thanked you properly. I owe you my life." Nathan shook his head. "You owe me nothing," he said. "At least let me buy you a meal," Marilee said, "or pay you for your trouble." "I do not need payment," Nathan said. His voice was firm but not unkind. "Just get better." He started to turn away, and Marilee felt a sudden, desperate need to stop him. "Will I see you again?" she asked. Nathan paused. He looked at her for a long moment, and she saw something in his eyes, some brief, unguarded emotion that was gone before she could name it. "Maybe," he said finally. Then he swung up onto his horse and rode away, disappearing into the crowd on the street. Mrs. Whittaker clicked her tongue. "That is Nathan Young for you," she said. "Does not talk much, keeps to himself, but there is not a better man in Nevada when you need help." She patted Marilee's arm. "Come on now, let us get you settled." The hotel room was small but clean, with a real bed and a washstand and a window that looked out over the street. Mrs. Whittaker helped Marilee out of her ruined dress and into a copper tub filled with warm water. As Marilee soaked, washing away days of dirt and fear, Mrs. Whittaker examined her feet. "These will heal," the woman said, "but you will need to stay off them for at least a week. What are your plans, dear? Do you have people here in Virginia City?" Marilee shook her head. "I was traveling to California," she said, "to marry a man I have never met. But I do not think I can make that journey now." "I should say not," Mrs. Whittaker said. "What about money? Do you have any funds?" Marilee's heart sank. She had not even thought about that. "No," she said quietly. "Everything was in the wagon, all my belongings, all my money. They left me with nothing." Mrs. Whittaker was quiet for a moment, her lips pressed into a thin line. Then she said, "Well, you cannot stay here for free, but I can offer you work once you are healed. I need help with the cleaning and the cooking and the laundry." It is hard work but honest, and you would have a room and meals." Relief flooded through Marilee. "Thank you," she said. "I will work hard, I promise." "I know you will," Mrs. Whitaker said. She smiled. "You have that look about you, determined, strong. You will be all right, Marilee Finch." Marilee hoped she was right. Over the next week, Marilee stayed in her small room, letting her feet heal. Mrs. Whitaker brought her meals and changed her bandages, applying more of the salve that Nathan had given her. Slowly, painfully, Marilee's feet began to improve. The raw places scabbed over, the swelling went down. The pain became manageable. During those long days, Marilee had plenty of time to think. She thought about the wagon train and wondered if they had reached California yet. She thought about the miner she was supposed to marry and what he would think when she never arrived. Mostly, though, she thought about Nathan Young. She could not get him out of her mind. The quiet strength of him, the gentleness in his hands as he tended her feet, the way he had asked for nothing in return. She remembered the feel of his arms around her, the sound of his voice telling her she was strong. She had never met anyone like him. She asked Mrs. Whitaker about him casually, as if she were just making conversation. "That man who brought me here," she said. "Nathan Young, what do you know about him?" Mrs. Whitaker gave her a knowing look. "Interested, are you?" she said. Marilee felt her cheeks warm. "Just curious," she said. "He saved my life. I would like to thank him properly." "Well, there is not much to tell," Mrs. Whitaker said. "He showed up in Virginia City about 2 years ago, bought himself a small piece of land outside town, runs a few head of cattle, does odd jobs when he needs the money. Keeps to himself mostly. I have never known him to court a woman or cause any trouble, just minds his own business and helps folks when they need it." "He seems lonely," Marilee said quietly. Mrs. Whitaker nodded. "I imagine he is," she said, "but some people wear loneliness like a coat, you know. They get so used to it, they do not know how to take it off anymore." Marilee thought about that for a long time after Mrs. Whitaker had gone. She wondered what had made Nathan that way, what had taught him to keep the world at arm's length. She wondered if anyone had ever tried to get close to him, or if he had always been alone. By the end of the week, Marilee could walk again, gingerly at first, then with increasing confidence. Mrs. Whitaker put her to work, and Marilee threw herself into it with determination. She cleaned rooms and washed linens and helped in the kitchen, learning the rhythms of the hotel. The work was hard, but it felt good to be useful, to earn her keep. She also started to get to know Virginia City. It was a mining town, rough and rowdy, full of men seeking their fortunes in the silver mines that honeycombed the surrounding mountains. But there were good people here too, families trying to build lives, shopkeepers and farmers and craftsmen. It was not the life Marilee had imagined for herself, but it was starting to feel like it might be enough. She saw Nathan once, from a distance, riding down the main street on his bay horse. Her heart had leaped at the sight of him, and she had raised her hand to wave, but he had not seen her, and she had been too shy to call out. He had looked tired, she thought, his shoulders slumped slightly, his hat pulled low. She wondered where he had been, what he had been doing, if he ever thought about her. 2 weeks after Nathan had brought her to Virginia City, Marilee was sweeping the front porch of the hotel when she heard a commotion down the street. She looked up to see a group of men surrounding someone, their voices raised and angry. Her stomach clenched when she saw who they had cornered: Nathan. Without thinking, Marilee dropped her broom and hurried down the street, ignoring the protest of her still tender feet. As she got closer, she could hear what the men were saying. "You had no right," one of them was shouting. He was a big man, red-faced and sweating, his fists clenched. "That was my claim. It was not registered," Nathan said calmly. "I checked at the land office. It was open." I was working that claim for months, the man yelled. Everyone knew it was mine. Then you should have filed the paperwork, Nathan said. His voice was still calm, but Marilee could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hand hovered near his gun. You are nothing but a claim jumper. Another man yelled. We should string you up right now. That is enough, Marilee said, pushing her way through the crowd. She stepped between Nathan and the angry men, her chin lifted, her heart pounding. This man saved my life. You will not threaten him in front of me. The big man sneered at her. Who are you to interfere, woman? This is men's business. This is justice's business, Marilee said. If Mr. Young filed the proper paperwork and you did not, then the claim is his by law. You have no right to threaten him. She is right, Garrett, said a new voice. Marilee turned to see an older man wearing a sheriff's badge. He was lean and gray-haired with sharp eyes that missed nothing. If Nathan filed proper claim, it is his. You know the rules. The big man, Garrett, glared at the sheriff. This is not over, Young, he said, jabbing a finger at Nathan. Not by a long shot. Then he turned and stalked away, his companions following. The sheriff looked at Nathan. You all right? He asked. Nathan nodded. Fine, Sheriff Morrison, thank you. The sheriff looked at Marilee, a slight smile playing at his lips. That was brave, miss, he said. Foolish, maybe, but brave. Someone had to say something, Marilee said. The sheriff tipped his hat and walked away, leaving Marilee alone with Nathan. She turned to look at him and found him staring at her with an unreadable expression. You should not have done that, he said. Why not? Marilee demanded. They were threatening you. I can take care of myself, Nathan said. I know that, Marilee said. But you should not have to, not when you are in the right. Nathan was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Thank you. You are welcome, Marilee said. They stood there in awkward silence, neither quite sure what to say. Finally, Marilee said, I have been wanting to see you. To thank you again for what you did. You already thanked me, Nathan said. I know, but it did not feel like enough, Marilee said. You saved my life, Nathan. How do I ever repay that? Nathan looked at her, really looked at her, and she saw something shift in his expression. You just did, he said quietly. Before Marilee could respond, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. She stood there on the dusty street, her heart racing, wondering what had just happened. That evening, after the supper dishes were washed and put away, Marilee sat on the porch of the hotel and watched the sun set behind the mountains. Mrs. Whittaker came out and sat beside her, 2 cups of tea in her hands. She gave one to Marilee and sipped from the other. I heard about what happened today, the older woman said. Marilee was not surprised. News traveled fast in a small town. He was in trouble, she said simply. I had to help. He made an impression on you, Mrs. Whittaker said. It was not a question. Marilee was quiet for a moment, then nodded. I cannot stop thinking about him, she admitted. Is that foolish? Not foolish, Mrs. Whittaker said, but maybe complicated. Nathan Young is not an easy man to know. I do not care about easy, Marilee said. He is good. That is what matters. Mrs. Whittaker smiled. You really are something, Marilee Finch, she said. That man does not know what is about to hit him. Over the next few weeks, Marilee found excuses to see Nathan. She would walk past the general store at times when she knew he would be there buying supplies. She would take the long way back from the market, which happened to lead past the trail to his property. Once, she even convinced Mrs. Whittaker to let her deliver a message to him about some work the hotel needed done. Nathan was always polite but distant, answering her questions with single words, avoiding her eyes. But Marilee was nothing if not persistent. She had faced down an angry mob for him. She was not going to be put off by a little silence. She learned things about him, slowly, piecing together information from their brief conversations and from what others told her. She learned that he had fought in the war, though on which side, no one seemed to know. She learned that he was honest and hardworking, that he kept his word, that he had never been known to cheat or steal. She learned that he lived alone in a small cabin on his property, that he raised cattle and horses, that he was good with his hands and could fix almost anything. She also learned that he came to town every Saturday evening and ate supper at the hotel restaurant. So, on Saturday evening, 3 weeks after the confrontation with Garrett, Marilee made sure she was the one serving. Nathan looked up when she appeared at his table, surprise flickering across his face. "Hello," he said. "Hello," Marilee said, smiling. "What can I get you?" "The usual," Nathan said. Then, after a pause, "Please." Marilee brought him steak and potatoes and coffee, then found excuses to linger near his table, refilling his coffee cup, asking if he needed anything else. Other customers needed attention too, but she kept coming back to him, drawn like a moth to a flame. When he had finished eating and paid his bill, Nathan stood to leave. Marilee followed him out onto the porch. "Nathan," she said. "Can I ask you something?" He turned, his hand on the porch railing. "What is it?" "Why do you avoid me?" Marilee asked. "Every time I try to talk to you, you find a reason to leave. Have I done something to offend you?" Nathan looked at her, and for the first time she saw uncertainty in his eyes. "No," he said. "You have not done anything wrong." "Then why?" Marilee pressed. Nathan was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Because you are not meant for someone like me." "What does that mean?" Marilee asked. "It means I am nobody," Nathan said. "A drifter with a small piece of land and no future. You should be with someone better, someone who can give you the life you deserve." "Should I not be the one to decide that?" Marilee asked. She took a step closer to him. "Nathan, I am not asking you to marry me. I am just asking you to be my friend. Can you do that?" Nathan looked at her for a long time. Then slowly he nodded. "I can try," he said. "Good," Marilee said, smiling. "Then you can start by taking me to the church social next Sunday. Mrs. Whitaker says there will be dancing and food and music. I do not know anyone here except her, and I would like to have someone to talk to." Nathan's eyes widened slightly. "I do not dance," he said. "Neither do I, really," Marilee said. "We can stand in the corner together and watch everyone else make fools of themselves." Despite himself, Nathan smiled. It was small and brief, but it was there, and Marilee felt like she had just won a great victory. "All right," he said. "I will take you to the church social." "Thank you," Marilee said. "I will see you Sunday then." Nathan nodded and walked away, and Marilee went back inside, her heart singing. Sunday came bright and clear, and Marilee dressed with care in a blue cotton dress that Mrs. Whitaker had given her. It was not fancy, but it was clean and mended and fit her well. She brushed her hair until it shone and pinned it up, leaving a few curls to frame her face. When she looked in the mirror, she saw a young woman who looked healthy and hopeful, and she smiled at her reflection. Nathan arrived at the hotel at noon, riding his bay horse and leading a gentle mare. He had cleaned up too, Marilee noticed. He wore a clean shirt and his best vest, and he had shaved. He looked handsome, and Marilee felt her cheeks warm. "You look nice," she said as he helped her onto the mare. "So do you," Nathan said, and there was something in his voice that made her heart skip. The church was on the edge of town, a simple wooden building with a small bell tower. By the time they arrived, the social was in full swing. Long tables had been set up in the yard, laden with food that the townswomen had prepared. Children ran and played while their parents talked and laughed. A small group of musicians tuned their instruments on a makeshift stage. Marilee and Nathan tied their horses and joined the gathering. People greeted Nathan with nods and hellos, and several women came over to introduce themselves to Marilee. She met the preacher's wife, Mrs. Dawson, who was kind and welcoming. She met the school teacher, Miss Harriet Cole, a young woman not much older than Marilee herself. She met merchants and miners and farmers, and she began to feel, for the first time since the wagon train had abandoned her, like she might actually belong somewhere. Nathan stayed close to her, not saying much but there, a steady presence at her side. When the music started and couples began to dance, Marilee looked at him hopefully. "I told you I do not dance," Nathan said. "One dance," Marilee said. "Please, I promise not to tell anyone if you step on my feet." Nathan looked like he wanted to refuse, but something in Marilee's expression made him relent. "One dance," he said. He led her out onto the dancing area, a flat stretch of packed earth beneath the trees. He took her hand and placed his other hand on her waist, and they began to move. Nathan was not graceful, but he was not terrible either. He moved with the same quiet competence he brought to everything else, and after a few awkward moments, they found their rhythm. "You are better at this than you claimed," Marilee said, smiling up at him. "My mother insisted I learn," Nathan said. "She said every man should know how to dance, even if he never used it." "She sounds like she was a wise woman," Marilee said. "She was," Nathan said, and there was warmth in his voice now, a softness that Marilee had not heard before. They danced 2 more songs, then 3, and Marilee lost track of time. She was aware only of Nathan's hand in hers, his arm around her waist, the way he looked at her when he thought she was not paying attention. She felt light and happy, more so than she had in months, maybe years. When the music paused for the musicians to rest, Nathan and Marilee went to get lemonade. They stood under a tree, drinking and watching the crowd, comfortable in a silence that no longer felt awkward. "Thank you for bringing me," Marilee said. "Thank you for making me come," Nathan said. "I had forgotten what this felt like." What felt like?" Marilee asked. Nathan was quiet for a moment. "Being part of something," he said. "Being with people. I have been alone for so long I forgot there was another way to be." Marilee's heart ached for him. She reached out and took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "You do not have to be alone anymore," she said. "Not if you do not want to be." Nathan looked down at their joined hands, then up at her face. "Marilee," he said, and there was something in his voice, something raw and uncertain. Before he could say more, there was a shout from across the yard. Marilee turned to see Garrett, the man who had confronted Nathan in the street, striding toward them. He was drunk, she could tell immediately, his face red and his movements unsteady. "Well, if it is not the claim jumper," Garrett said loudly. Several people turned to look, and the music stuttered to a stop. "Come to show your face around decent people, have you?" "Leave it alone, Garrett," Nathan said quietly. "This is not the place." "I will decide where the place is," Garrett said. He jabbed a finger at Nathan's chest. "You stole what was mine. You are a thief and a liar." "The claim was not registered," Nathan said, his voice still calm but with an edge now. "I filed proper paperwork. If you have a complaint, take it to the land office." "I am taking it to you," Garrett said. He shoved Nathan hard, and Nathan stumbled back a step. "Stop it," Marilee said, stepping between them again. "You are drunk and making a scene. Leave us alone." Garrett's eyes focused on her, and his lip curled. "You are that woman who defended him before," he said. "What are you, his whore?" The words hung in the air like a slap. Marilee felt the blood drain from her face, felt the eyes of the entire gathering on her. Then Nathan moved, fast as a striking snake. His fist connected with Garrett's jaw with a solid thud, and the big man went down hard, sprawling in the dirt. "You will apologize to the lady," Nathan said. His voice was cold and hard, and his hand hovered over his gun. "Now." Garrett scrambled to his feet, his hand going to his own weapon, but Sheriff Morrison was there suddenly, stepping between them. "That is enough," the sheriff said. "Garrett, you are drunk and disorderly. Go home and sleep it off, or I will throw you in jail." "He hit me," Garrett protested. "You insulted a lady," the sheriff said. "You are lucky he only hit you once. Now go before I change my mind about that jail cell." Garrett glared at Nathan and Marilee, but he turned and stumbled away. The sheriff looked at Nathan. "You all right?" he asked. Nathan nodded, though his hand was shaking slightly. "I am fine." "Good," the sheriff said. He looked at Marilee. "I am sorry you had to hear that, miss. Garrett is a fool, especially when he has been drinking." "It is all right," Marilee said, though it was not. She could still hear the ugly word echoing in her mind, could still feel the shame of it. The sheriff moved away to restore order, and the music started up again, people trying to pretend nothing had happened. But Marilee could see them whispering, could feel their eyes on her. Suddenly, she wanted to be anywhere but here. "I would like to go," she said quietly to Nathan. "Of course," Nathan said. He took her arm and led her to the horses, helping her mount with gentle hands. They rode back to town in silence, and when they arrived at the hotel, Nathan helped her down. "I am sorry," he said. "I should not have brought you. I should have known Garrett would make trouble." "It is not your fault," Marilee said. She tried to smile, but her lips were trembling. "Thank you for defending me." "Always," Nathan said, and the word was a promise. Marilee went inside, but instead of going to her room, she sat on the bottom step of the staircase and let the tears come. She cried for the humiliation, for the injustice of it all, for the way one cruel word could make her feel so small. She heard footsteps and looked up to see Mrs. Whitaker. The older woman sat down beside her and put an arm around her shoulders. "I heard what happened," Mrs. Whitaker said. "Garrett is a mean drunk, always has been. Do not let his words touch you, child." "But people will talk," Marilee said. "They will think terrible things about me." "People who matter will not," Mrs. Whitaker said firmly. "And people who talk do not matter. You hold your head up, Marilee Finch. You have done nothing wrong." Marilee leaned against the older woman and let herself be comforted, but even as Mrs. Whitaker's words soothed her, she could not shake the feeling that something had changed. The tentative peace she had found in Virginia City felt fragile now, threatened by the ugliness of men like Garrett. Over the next few days, Marilee threw herself into her work, trying not to think about the church social or the whispers that followed her through town. She saw Nathan once, from the hotel window, and he had looked up as if he felt her watching. Their eyes had met, and she had seen the concern in his gaze, but she had turned away before he could do anything. She was not avoiding him exactly. She just needed time to think, to figure out what she wanted. Because the truth was, she was falling for Nathan Young, and that terrified her. She had come west to escape an arranged marriage, to find independence and freedom. She had not planned on falling in love, especially not with a quiet cowboy who wore loneliness like armor, but her heart did not care about her plans. It beat faster when she saw him, ached when she thought about him, yearned for his presence in a way that was both thrilling and frightening. A week after the church social, Marilee was in the hotel kitchen helping Mrs. Whitaker prepare supper when there was a knock at the back door. Mrs. Whitaker went to answer it and came back with a small package wrapped in brown paper. "This is for you," she said, handing it to Marilee. "Nathan Young brought it. He said to give it to you, then left before I could invite him in." Marilee's hands trembled slightly as she unwrapped the package. Inside was a pair of shoes, beautiful and well made, the leather soft and supple. There was also a note written in a careful hand. "You should not have to walk in pain, Nathan." Tears sprang to Marilee's eyes. She clutched the shoes to her chest, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness of the gesture. Nathan had remembered her ruined shoes, had gone to the trouble and expense of buying her new ones. It was the kindest thing anyone had ever done for her. "That man is in love with you," Mrs. Whittaker said softly, "even if he does not know it yet." "I am in love with him too," Marilee said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "I know it is foolish and we barely know each other, but I cannot help it. I love him." Mrs. Whittaker smiled. "Then you should tell him," she said. "What if he does not feel the same way?" Marilee asked. "He bought you shoes, child," Mrs. Whittaker said. "Trust me, he feels the same way." Marilee looked down at the shoes in her hands, at the note with its simple, heartfelt message. Mrs. Whittaker was right. She could not hide from this, could not pretend she did not feel what she felt. She needed to see Nathan, to tell him the truth, to find out if he felt the same way. She took off her apron and grabbed her shawl. "I am going to his place," she said. "Right now." "Good girl," Mrs. Whittaker said. "Take the brown mare from the stable. She knows the way." Marilee did as she was told, saddling the mare with hands that shook from nerves and excitement. She rode out of town, following the directions Mrs. Whittaker had given her. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and the air was cool and sweet. Nathan's property was about 5 miles outside of town, a small valley with a creek running through it. Marilee saw the cabin first, a sturdy log structure with a stone chimney. Beyond it was a barn and a corral with several horses. It was simple and unpretentious, like Nathan himself. She dismounted and tied the mare to the porch railing, then knocked on the door. There was no answer. She knocked again, louder this time, but still nothing. She walked around the cabin looking for Nathan and found him behind the barn, chopping wood. He had taken off his shirt, and Marilee stopped in her tracks, her breath catching. His back and shoulders were muscled from hard work, his skin tanned and glistening with sweat. He swung the axe with easy strength, splitting the logs cleanly. He had not heard her approach over the sound of his own work. "Nathan," she called. He spun around, the axe lowering, surprise written all over his face. "Marilee," he said. "What are you doing here?" "I came to thank you," she said, holding up the shoes. "These are beautiful." "You did not have to do this." Nathan set the axe down and reached for his shirt, pulling it on. "I wanted to," he said. "I hated seeing you in pain." "Why did you leave without saying goodbye?" Marilee asked. "You could have given them to me yourself." Nathan looked uncomfortable. "I did not think you would want to see me," he said. "After what happened at the church social, I brought trouble to you just like I knew I would." "You did not bring trouble," Marilee said. "Garrett did, and I do not care what he or anyone else thinks. Nathan, I came here to tell you something." She took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "I am falling in love with you," she said. "I know we have not known each other long, and I know you probably think I am crazy, but I cannot keep it to myself anymore. You saved my life, yes, but it is more than that. You are kind and strong and good, and when I am with you, I feel safe. I feel like I have finally found where I belong." Nathan stared at her, his face unreadable. For a long, terrible moment, Marilee thought she had made a mistake, that he was going to tell her she was foolish, that she should leave. Then he closed the distance between them in 3 long strides and cupped her face in his hands. "I am in love with you too," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I have been fighting it since the day I found you on that road, but I cannot fight it anymore. You are all I think about, Marilee. You have turned my whole world upside down, and I do not want it to go back to the way it was." "Then it will not," Marilee said, her heart soaring. "We will figure it out together." Nathan kissed her then, a sweet, tender kiss that tasted of hope and promise. Marilee wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him back, pouring all her love and longing into it. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. "Stay for supper," Nathan said. "Please, I do not want you to go yet." "I will stay," Marilee said. They went into the cabin and Nathan showed her around. It was small and sparsely furnished, but clean and well kept. There was a stone fireplace, a table with 2 chairs, a narrow bed in the corner. It was a lonely place, Marilee thought, a place for a man who expected to be alone, but it did not have to be that way anymore. Nathan cooked supper, simple fare like he had made on the trail, but Marilee enjoyed every bite. They talked as they ate, really talked, sharing their stories and their dreams. Marilee told him about her parents and her difficult aunt, about her journey west and the wagon train. Nathan told her about growing up on a farm in Missouri, about losing his parents, about fighting in the war and the things he had seen that still haunted him. "I thought I would just drift forever," Nathan said. "I did not see the point in putting down roots when everyone I loved was gone. But then I found you, and suddenly I could imagine a future again. I could imagine being happy." "You can be happy," Marilee said. "We both can, together." As the evening wore on, they moved to sit on the porch, watching the stars come out one by one. Nathan put his arm around Marilee and she leaned against him, perfectly content. The night was cool and quiet, the only sounds the chirping of crickets and the distant call of an owl. "I should take you back," Nathan said reluctantly. "Mrs. Whitaker will worry." "I know," Marilee said. But neither of them moved. They sat there, wrapped in each other's warmth, neither wanting the evening to end. Finally, Nathan stood and helped Marilee to her feet. He saddled his horse and they rode back to town together, Marilee on the mare and Nathan beside her. When they reached the hotel, Nathan helped her down and walked her to the door. "Can I see you tomorrow?" he asked. "Yes," Marilee said, "and the day after that and the day after that." Nathan smiled and it transformed his face, making him look younger and lighter. "Good," he said. He kissed her again, a lingering kiss that left her dizzy. "Good night, Marilee." "Good night, Nathan," she said. She watched him ride away, then went inside, her heart full. Mrs. Whitaker was waiting up, knitting in her chair by the fireplace. "How did it go?" the older woman asked. "He loves me," Marilee said, unable to keep the smile off her face. "He loves me and I love him and everything is wonderful." Mrs. Whitaker laughed. "I told you so," she said. "That man was smitten from the moment he laid eyes on you." Marilee hugged Mrs. Whitaker, then went upstairs to her room. She put on her nightgown and climbed into bed, but she did not sleep for a long time. She lay awake, thinking about Nathan, about the future they could build together. For the first time since the wagon train had abandoned her, she felt truly happy. She felt like she was home. The next few months were the happiest of Marilee's life. Nathan came to town every day, sometimes with work for the hotel, sometimes just to see her. They took long walks together, exploring the countryside around Virginia City. They attended church socials and town meetings, and slowly, people began to accept them as a couple. Even Garrett seemed to have given up his grudge, staying out of their way and keeping his mouth shut. Nathan was different when he was with Marilee. The loneliness that had surrounded him like a wall began to crumble. He smiled more, laughed more, talked more. He introduced her to his neighbors, showed her his land, his cattle, his dreams for the future. And Marilee shared her own dreams, her hopes for a life of her own, a place where she belonged. They talked about marriage, but in no hurry. They wanted to be sure, wanted to build a foundation of trust and friendship as well as love. But Marilee knew, as surely as she knew anything, that she would marry Nathan Young, that they would build a life together, have children together, grow old together. One evening in early autumn, Nathan took Marilee to a spot on his property where the creek widened into a pool. The water was clear and cold, reflecting the golden leaves of the cottonwood trees that lined the banks. It was beautiful, peaceful, and Marilee understood why Nathan loved this place. "I want to build a house here," Nathan said, gesturing to a flat stretch of ground near the pool. "A real house, not just a cabin, big enough for a family." Marilee's heart skipped. "A family," she said. Nathan turned to her and took her hands. "Marilee Finch, will you marry me?" he asked. "I do not have much to offer you except this land and my love, but I promise I will spend every day trying to make you happy." "Yes," Marilee said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, Nathan, I will marry you." He pulled a ring from his pocket, a simple gold band that had belonged to his mother. He slipped it onto Marilee's finger, and it fit perfectly, as if it had been meant for her all along. They were married a month later, in the little church on the edge of town. The whole town turned out for the wedding, and Marilee wore a dress that Mrs. Whittaker had helped her sew. It was simple white cotton with lace at the collar and cuffs, and Marilee felt like a queen in it. Nathan stood at the altar, watching her walk down the aisle, and the look in his eyes made Marilee's breath catch. It was love, pure and simple, with no reservations and no doubts. When she reached him, he took her hand, and they spoke their vows in front of God and everyone they knew. "I, Nathan Young, take you, Marilee Finch, to be my wife. I promise to love you, honor you, and cherish you for all the days of my life. I, Marilee Finch, take you, Nathan Young, to be my husband. I promise to love you, honor you, and cherish you for all the days of my life." The preacher pronounced them husband and wife, and Nathan kissed Marilee to cheers and applause. Then they walked back down the aisle together, hand in hand, ready to begin their new life. The reception was held at the hotel, and Mrs. Whittaker had outdone herself with the food. There was roast beef and potatoes, fresh bread and butter, pies and cakes. The musicians played and people danced, and Marilee and Nathan were swept up in the celebration. When the party finally wound down, Nathan and Marilee rode out to his property, their property now. He had been working on the cabin, enlarging it, making it more comfortable. It was still modest, but it was clean and cozy, and when Nathan carried Marilee over the threshold, she knew she was truly home. That night, they lay in each other's arms, talking and laughing and dreaming. They made love for the first time, and it was sweet and tender and everything Marilee had hoped it would be. Afterward, Nathan held her close, his hand stroking her hair, and she felt safer and more loved than she had ever felt in her life. "I love you," Nathan whispered. "I love you too," Marilee said. "Always." The months that followed were full of hard work but also joy. Nathan and Marilee worked side by side, building their ranch, building their life. They acquired more cattle, improved the land, started construction on the new house by the creek. It was slow going, but they did not mind. They had each other, and that was all that mattered. In the spring, Marilee realized she was pregnant. She told Nathan one evening after supper, and he stared at her for a long moment before breaking into a huge smile. He swept her up in his arms and spun her around, laughing with pure happiness. "A baby," he said. "We are going to have a baby." "We are," Marilee said, laughing too. "Are you happy?" "Happy," Nathan said. "Marilee, I am the happiest man alive. The pregnancy was not easy." Marilee was sick for the first few months, and the summer heat made her uncomfortable. But Nathan was there every step of the way, fetching her water, holding her hair back when she was ill, rubbing her aching feet. He treated her like she was made of glass, and while it was sometimes frustrating, it was also deeply touching. In late autumn, on a cool, clear day, Marilee went into labor. Mrs. Whittaker came to help, along with the town midwife, a capable woman named Mrs. Pratt. Nathan paced outside the cabin, too nervous to sit still, praying harder than he had ever prayed in his life. It was a long labor, and there were moments when Marilee thought she could not go on, when the pain was too much, and she was too tired. But then she would hear Nathan's voice outside, calling encouragement, and she would find the strength to keep going. Finally, after nearly 20 hours, the baby was born. It was a boy, healthy and strong, with a shock of dark hair and his father's gray eyes. Mrs. Whitaker wrapped him in a blanket and handed him to Marilee, and she looked down at her son in wonder. "He is perfect," she whispered. Nathan was allowed in then, and he came to the bed, his eyes wide with awe. He looked at the baby, then at Marilee, and tears ran down his face. "Thank you," he said, his voice choked. "Thank you for giving me this." They named him Thomas after Nathan's father. Little Tommy was a good baby, easy and content, and Nathan was a devoted father. He would sit for hours just holding his son, singing to him, telling him stories. Watching them together, Marilee felt her heart overflow with love. The years passed in a blur of work and love and laughter. The new house was finished, a beautiful two-story structure with a wide porch and big windows that let in the light. They had more children, a daughter named Sarah, then another son they called James. Their ranch prospered, and they became well-respected members of the Virginia city community, but it was not always easy. There were droughts and hard winters, sick cattle and broken fences. There were arguments and misunderstandings, times when money was tight and tempers were short. But through it all, Nathan and Marilee held on to each other, remembering the love that had brought them together. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Nathan took Marilee back to the spot where he had found her, that dusty road where she had been walking with bleeding feet. They stood there in the evening light, older now, marked by life but still deeply in love. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I had not come along that day?" Nathan asked. "Sometimes," Marilee admitted, "but I try not to. Because this is where I was meant to be, Nathan, with you. No matter how hard the journey was to get here, it was worth it." Nathan pulled her close and kissed her, and Marilee closed her eyes and thanked God for the day a quiet cowboy had lifted her onto his horse and changed her life forever. They returned to the ranch as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Their children ran out to meet them, Tommy now 10 years old and already showing signs of becoming as tall and strong as his father. Sarah was 8, with her mother's dark hair and quick wit. James was 6, wild and energetic, always getting into mischief. "Did you have a good ride?" Tommy asked. "We did," Nathan said, ruffling his son's hair. "Your mother and I were just remembering old times." "Tell us a story," Sarah begged. "Tell us how you met." Marilee and Nathan exchanged a smile. It was a story they had told many times, but the children never tired of hearing it. They all went inside, and after the children were bathed and in their night clothes, they gathered in the parlor. Nathan settled into his chair by the fireplace, and Marilee sat on the arm, her hand on his shoulder. The children arranged themselves at their feet, looking up with expectant faces. "Well," Nathan began, "it was a hot day in late summer, and I was riding from one place to another, not really going anywhere in particular. I came around a bend in the road and I saw something that made me stop. A woman, walking alone, and she was hurt." "That was Mama," James said importantly. "That was Mama," Nathan agreed. "Her feet were bleeding from walking and she was so tired she could barely stand. But when I looked in her eyes, I saw strength there, courage. I knew right then that this was someone special." "What did you do?" Sarah asked, even though she knew the answer. "I lifted her onto my horse without a word," Nathan said. "Because sometimes words are not needed. Sometimes the only thing to do is act to help someone who needs it and worry about everything else later." "And then you fell in love," Tommy said. "And then we fell in love," Marilee confirmed. "Not right away. It took time. But your father showed me kindness when I needed it most, and I learned that he was good and honest and true. Those are the things that matter most in a person." "Will I find someone like that?" Sarah asked. "You will," Marilee said. "Someday, when you are older, You will find someone who sees you for who you really are and who loves you not in spite of your flaws but because of them. And when you find that person, you hold on to them and do not let go." The children were satisfied with this, and Marilee and Nathan tucked them into bed, kissing each one good night. Then they went to their own room, the one that overlooked the creek and the cottonwood trees. They stood at the window, looking out at the land they had built together, and Nathan wrapped his arms around Marilee from behind. "Do you have any regrets?" he asked quietly. "Not one," Marilee said. "You?" "Only that I did not find you sooner," Nathan said. "Think of all the time we wasted, living separate lives, not knowing the other existed." "But we found each other in the end," Marilee said. "That is what matters." They went to bed and lay in the darkness, listening to the sounds of the night. Marilee thought about the girl she had been, walking that dusty road with bleeding feet, certain she was going to die. She could never have imagined then that her life would turn out like this, that she would find love and family and home in this wild, beautiful place. "Nathan," she said softly. "Yes, thank you for saving me." "Thank you for letting me," Nathan said. He kissed her temple. "Now go to sleep, wife. We have a busy day tomorrow." Marilee smiled and closed her eyes, safe in the circle of Nathan's arms, and slept. The years continued to pass, marked by the changing seasons and the milestones of their children's lives. Tommy grew into a fine young man, serious and responsible like his father. He took over more and more of the ranch work, learning everything Nathan could teach him about cattle and horses and the land. Sarah was bright and curious, always reading, always asking questions. She talked about becoming a teacher someday, and Marilee encouraged her, proud of her daughter's intelligence and ambition. James was the wild one, always exploring, always getting into trouble, but with a good heart that reminded Marilee of Nathan. When Tommy was 18, he met a girl at a church social, the daughter of a neighboring rancher. Her name was Elizabeth, and she was sweet and pretty and clearly smitten with Tommy. Marilee watched them dance together and remembered herself and Nathan at that same church so many years ago, and she felt the strange bittersweetness of seeing her child grow up. "He is going to marry her," Nathan said, appearing at Marilee's side. "I know," Marilee said. "Is it wrong that I am not ready for that?" "No," Nathan said, taking her hand. "But it is how life works. We raise them and love them and teach them everything we can, and then we let them go to build their own lives." "When did you become so wise?" Marilee teased. "I have been married to you for nearly 20 years, Nathan said. "Some of it was bound to rub off." Marilee laughed and leaned against him, and they watched their son fall in love, just as they had done so long ago. Tommy and Elizabeth were married the following spring, and they built a small house on the far corner of the ranch. It was strange having another woman in the family, but Elizabeth was kind and hardworking, and she fit in well. Within a year, she gave birth to a daughter, and Marilee became a grandmother for the first time. Holding her granddaughter, a tiny thing with Elizabeth's blonde hair and Tommy's serious expression, Marilee felt the circle of life complete itself. She thought of Nathan's mother, whom she had never met, and wondered if the woman would be proud of the family they had built, of the legacy they were leaving. "She is beautiful," Nathan said, looking at the baby with the same wonder he had shown when holding his own children for the first time. "She is," Marilee agreed. "What did they name her?" "Emma," Tommy said, "after Elizabeth's mother." "Emma Young," Marilee said, testing the name. "It is perfect." As Emma grew, she was joined by cousins. Sarah, now 20, married a young lawyer who had recently moved to Virginia City. His name was David, and he was intelligent and kind, and he clearly adored Sarah. They had twin boys, which delighted everyone and kept Sarah very busy. James, at 18, was not yet thinking about marriage, too busy with his adventures and explorations, but Marilee knew his time would come. Nathan's hair was more gray than dark now, and there were lines around his eyes and mouth. But to Marilee, he was as handsome as the day she had met him. He moved a little slower these days, his joints stiff from years of hard work, but he was still strong, still capable, still the man she had fallen in love with. Marilee herself had changed too. She was no longer the desperate girl walking the desert with bleeding feet. She was a woman who had built a life, raised children, survived droughts and hard times and all the challenges that came with ranching in Nevada. Her hands were calloused, her face lined from sun and wind, but she was happy. Deeply, completely happy. One evening, as they sat on the porch of the big house, watching the sun set behind the mountains, Nathan said, "I have been thinking." "About what?" Marilee asked. "About how lucky I am," Nathan said. "I could have ridden right past you that day. I almost did. But something made me stop, made me look at you, and my whole life changed." "My life changed too," Marilee said. "You saved me, Nathan, in every way a person can be saved." "We saved each other," Nathan said. He took her hand, his thumb rubbing over the gold band she had worn for more than 30 years. "I was lost before I met you, Marilee, just drifting, not caring about anything. You gave me a reason to care, a reason to build something, a reason to hope." Marilee's eyes filled with tears. "I love you," she said. "I have loved you from almost the beginning, and I will love you until the end." "And I love you," Nathan said. "Always." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn from gold to pink to purple. Their grandchildren were playing in the yard, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. Tommy and Elizabeth were walking by the creek, hand in hand. Sarah and David were in town but would be back soon. James was in the barn, tending to a horse with a sore leg. This was their life, Marilee thought. This was what they had built together from nothing but love and determination and faith. And it was good. It was more than good. It was everything. The seasons turned and more years passed. Nathan and Marilee settled into a comfortable routine, leaving more of the ranch work to Tommy and his family while they enjoyed their grandchildren and each other. They took long walks together, slower now but no less enjoyable. They spent evenings on the porch, talking and remembering and planning for the future. When Nathan was 60 and Marilee was 55, they decided to take a trip. They had never left Virginia City in all their years together, too busy with the ranch and the children. But now, with Tommy running things, they felt free to travel. They went to San Francisco, taking the train through the mountains, and Marilee marveled at the city with its tall buildings and busy streets. They stayed in a hotel that was far fancier than Mrs. Whitaker's had ever been, with carpet on the floors and gaslights on the walls. They went to restaurants and theaters, and Nathan bought Marilee a new dress from a shop that had clothes from Paris. But as wonderful as it all was, they both agreed that they were ready to go home after a week. Virginia City was where they belonged on their ranch with their family. That was where their hearts were. On the train ride back, Nathan said, "I am glad we came, but I am gladder to be going home." "Me too," Marilee said. She looked at her husband, at the man who had lifted her onto his horse all those years ago, and felt a wave of love so strong it took her breath away. "You are my home, Nathan. Wherever you are, that is where I belong." Nathan smiled and kissed her, and Marilee closed her eyes and thanked God once again for the blessing of this man, this life, this love. They returned to the ranch to find everything running smoothly. Tommy had handled everything perfectly, and their grandchildren greeted them with hugs and excitement, eager to hear about the trip. Marilee told them stories of the city, of the tall buildings and the ocean, and the children listened with wide eyes. But it was good to be back in their own bed, to wake to the sound of the creek and the birds, to see the sun rise over the mountains they knew so well. It was good to be home. The years continued to be kind to them. Their health remained good, and their family continued to grow. Tommy and Elizabeth had 3 more children, and Sarah and David had another set of twins, girls this time. James finally settled down, marrying a woman named Catherine who was as adventurous as he was, and they had 2 sons who were already showing signs of being as wild as their father. Nathan and Marilee watched it all with pride and joy, grateful for every day, every moment. They knew they were blessed, knew that not everyone got to have the kind of love they shared, the kind of family they had built. On their 40th wedding anniversary, the whole family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. There were more than 30 people there, children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, all descended from Marilee and Nathan. They ate and danced and told stories, and when the sun began to set, Tommy stood and called for everyone's attention. "I want to make a toast," he said, raising his glass. "To my parents, Nathan and Marilee Young. They showed us all what love looks like, what commitment looks like, what it means to build a life with someone. They taught us to work hard, to be honest, to care for each other and for the land. Everything we have, everything we are, we owe to them. Hear, hear." Everyone chorused, and Marilee wiped tears from her eyes. Nathan stood and helped Marilee to her feet. "Thank you all for being here," he said. "Marilee and I could not have asked for a better family, a better life. We are grateful for every one of you." Then he turned to Marilee and said, "And I am most grateful for you, my dear wife. You have been my partner, my best friend, my love for 40 years, and if I had it to do over again, I would not change a single thing." "Neither would I," Marilee said. "You are my heart, Nathan Young. You always have been, and you always will be." They kissed to applause and cheers, and then the party continued, lasting long into the night. When everyone had finally gone home or gone to bed, Nathan and Marilee sat on the porch one last time, looking up at the stars. 40 years, Nathan said. "It does not seem possible." "It seems like yesterday and like a lifetime ago, all at once," Marilee said. "Do you remember the day you found me?" "Every detail," Nathan said. "Your feet were bleeding from walking. You looked so brave and so scared at the same time. I knew I could not just ride by, could not leave you there. And you lifted me onto your horse without a word," Marilee said. "That was the moment my life began, Nathan. Everything before that was just waiting for you. And everything after has been better than I ever dreamed," Nathan said. He stood and held out his hand to Marilee. "Come on, wife, let us go to bed. We have been up too late." Marilee took his hand and let him help her up, and they went inside together, closing the door on another perfect day. The years continued to pass, and Nathan and Marilee grew older but no less devoted to each other. They slowed down, spending more time in their rocking chairs on the porch than working the ranch. But they were content, surrounded by family, secure in the knowledge that they had lived a good life, a meaningful life. When Nathan was 75, he fell ill. It was nothing dramatic, just a cough that would not go away, a tiredness that sleep could not cure. The doctor came and shook his head and said there was nothing to be done. Nathan's heart was giving out, worn down by decades of hard work and hard living. Marilee refused to leave his side. She sat by his bed, holding his hand, telling him stories of their life together. Their children and grandchildren came to visit, and Nathan smiled at each one, told them he loved them, gave them his blessing. One evening, as the sun was setting, Nathan opened his eyes and looked at Marilee. "I am not afraid," he said, his voice weak but steady. "I know," Marilee said, tears streaming down her face, "but I am not ready to let you go." "You will not have to," Nathan said. I will always be with you, Marilee. In this land we built together, in our children and grandchildren, in every sunrise and every star, I will always be with you." "I love you," Marilee said. "I love you so much." "I love you too," Nathan said. "Thank you for the life we had. Thank you for saying yes all those years ago. Thank you for being my wife." He closed his eyes then, and his breathing slowed, and as the last light of day faded from the sky, Nathan Young took his final breath. Marilee held him, rocking back and forth, her tears falling on his still face. "Goodbye, my love," she whispered. "Until we meet again." The funeral was held 3 days later, and it seemed like everyone in Virginia City came to pay their respects. Nathan had been well loved, well respected, and people shared stories of his kindness, his integrity, his quiet strength. They buried him on a hill overlooking the ranch, where he could see the creek and the house and the land he had loved so much. Marilee stood at the graveside, supported by her children, and she thought about the journey that had brought her here. She thought about the desperate girl walking the desert, the cowboy who had saved her, the life they had built together. It had been a good life, a beautiful life, and even though it hurt to lose Nathan, she would not trade a single moment of it. The months that followed were hard. Marilee missed Nathan with an ache that never quite went away. She missed his presence, his voice, his touch. She missed their conversations on the porch, their walks by the creek, the simple comfort of sleeping beside him. But she was not alone. Her family surrounded her, supporting her, making sure she was cared for. Tommy and Elizabeth moved into the big house to be close to her, and her grandchildren visited every day, filling the house with noise and laughter. Slowly, the acute pain of grief softened into a gentler sadness, a bittersweet remembrance. Marilee lived another 10 years after Nathan's death. She saw her great-grandchildren grow and her family expand even more. She told stories of Nathan to anyone who would listen, keeping his memory alive. And every evening she would sit on the porch and look up at the stars, and she would feel him there beside her, his hand in hers, his love surrounding her. When Marilee was 85, she fell asleep one night and did not wake up. It was peaceful, quiet, the way she would have wanted it. Her family mourned her, but they also celebrated, knowing that she was with Nathan again, that they were together once more. They buried Marilee beside Nathan on the hill, and on the shared headstone they carved, "Nathan and Marilee Young, together in life, together in death, together forever." The ranch continued to thrive, passed down through the generations, a testament to the love and hard work of the couple who had built it. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the sun was setting and the wind was just right, people swore they could see 2 figures standing on the porch of the big house, hand in hand, looking out over the land they had loved so much. It was just a story, of course. A legend passed down through the family, but like all the best legends, it held a kernel of truth. Nathan and Marilee's love had been real, deep, and enduring. It had survived hardship and loss, time and change. It had built a family, a ranch, a legacy that would last for generations. And it all started on a dusty road in Nevada, when a cowboy saw a woman with bleeding feet and, without a word, lifted her onto his horse and changed both their lives forever. That single act of kindness, that moment of compassion, had rippled outward, touching countless lives, creating a love story for the ages. The ranch still stands today, nearly 150 years later, still owned by descendants of Nathan and Marilee Young. The big house has been renovated and expanded, but the bones are the same. The creek still runs through the property, and the cottonwood trees still grow along its banks. And on the hill overlooking it all, 2 headstones stand side by side, marking the resting place of a cowboy and the woman he loved. Their story is told and retold, passed down from parent to child, a reminder that love can come from the most unexpected places, that a single act of kindness can change everything, that two people who choose to build a life together can create something that lasts forever. And so the legend lives on, a testament to the enduring power of love, of commitment, of two souls who found each other in the vast wilderness of the American West and refused to let go. Nathan and Marilee Young, the cowboy and the woman with bleeding feet, together forever in the land they loved and the family they created. Their love story ended, but its echoes continue, a beacon of hope and inspiration for all who hear it, proof that true love, once found, never truly dies.